Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the What If. Chapter 16. A hero's not so triumphant return. Issei didn't think he'd ever been more worried in his life. He and Akeno had been returning from their patrol of the surrounding area, when a massive explosion rocked Ko Academy. They had seen it, a bright white light that pierced the heavens. They had heard it, the thunderous roar that nearly blew out their eardrums. Issei had seen many things since becoming a devil, but he'd never seen something like this. Aiz-kun, Akeno shook Issei out of his dumbfounded state. He turned to her, his eyes nearly bulging from their sockets. She mirrored his look. Unlike him, however, she could still act. We need to go, now. Issei took a nearly hyperventilating breath, gathering what wits he could. All right. Together, the two set off toward Ko Academy. Devil Ninja. The Battle of Ko Academy had started. Despite the fallen angels' surprise attack, the defenders were quick to rally. Pairing up, the groups moved to their designated choke points and prepared themselves. They may have been caught with their pants down, but that didn't mean they would allow themselves to be defeated here. Devil Ninja. They flew in on wings of black. Like a horde of vengeful demons, they invaded the academy. Walls were blown to bits. What remained of the roof collapsed, perforated by dozens of light spears as the fallen angels entered the academy building. It was only a token force that entered the academy itself, a group sent to scout for survivors, but that meant little when those involved didn't care about what happened to the structure. One of these many groups wandered down a hallway on the second floor. While much of the third floor had been destroyed, the second remained mostly intact. They searched the halls, peered into rooms, all in an effort to locate their enemies. And they found one. He stood alone. His stance was polite, almost as if he was not about to confront several fallen angels belonging to the group who'd just destroyed much of his school. Hello. He bowed politely. I apologize in advance if this seems rude, but I'm going to have to ask you to leave. The fallen angels looked at each other, their incredulous gazes mirroring each of their brethren. Was this guy serious? Did he really think they would leave because he'd asked them to? Preposterous. They charged at the lone figure, who sighed, as if saddened by this situation devolving into one that needed to be solved with violence. Oh well, can't say I didn't try. Two blades appeared in his hands. One was jagged, worn, its bladed edge serrated and vicious. The other presented an unusual contrast. It was double-edged. Red symbols of power traced the inside. Arcane words of a long-dead language meandered across the polished surface. The dark steel appeared to be that of a demon's sword, and it certainly gave off the feel of demonic energy. However, the demonic energy was strange, diluted, mixed. Holy energy was present as well, and its radiant light caused the fallen angels to hesitate, if only for a second. A second was all he needed. In a burst of speed, Kiba disappeared. His form blurred before the fallen angels, a mere streak that they had no hope of keeping up with. And then he was in their midst, his blades flashing out, biting into flesh. The fallen screamed as they were sliced apart by the two blades, more different than night and day. One fallen angel survived. He was lucky enough to have had someone between him and Kiba during the blonde boy's initial assault. That meant little, however, as now there was no one left but him. He tried to flee. He didn't get very far before something sharp went straight through his chest, causing him to stumble. Looking down, the last thing he saw was the tip of a naginata jutting from his chest. Devil Ninja. Kiba glanced around at the group of dead fallen angels, and then shifted his gaze to Tsubaki as she pulled her naginata from the corpse she had stabbed. Thanks for the assist, Senpai. Kiba gave her a roguish smile, which caused Tsubaki to blush ever so slightly. Of course, Kiba-san. It is always a pleasure to be of help. She turned serious a second later. It looks like the battle has begun. Indeed, Kiba followed suit, his expression becoming grave. Come on, we need to follow the plan set by Rias and Sona. The others should already be gathering in preparation for the initial assault. Tsubaki nodded and twirled her naginata about with expert hands. The two soon took off, intent on defending their school. If these fallen angels wanted a war, then they would give them a war. Devil Ninja. Issei gritted his teeth and glared at the figure impeding their progress. Out of all the people he'd expected to see again, She was the one he wanted to see the least. Rainier. He snarled, his boosted gear clenched into a right fist, metallic fingers clacking. Hello, Issei-kun. Rainer's smile was just as he remembered it during their battle. Vicious, hateful, arrogant. He hated that smile that looked down on him. I hope you're pleased to see me, she purred. You don't know how long I've been waiting to see you again. What are you doing here, Rainier? It took everything he had not to rush this bitch and punch her in the face. Are you here to cause more pain? I swear, if you even think of trying to hurt Asia again, I am not here for that simpering little girl, the beautiful yet ugly fallen angel scoffed. I do not care about her. No, I am here for you, she pointed at him, the one who defeated me. I am here to exact my vengeance on you for the humiliation I suffered after being beaten by your hands. Issei's mouth bled as he gnashed his teeth together. He remembered the last time they'd seen each other. He had let her go after listening to Naruto's talk of hatred and revenge. He had let her go, hoping that doing so would prevent that hatred from spreading. Yet here she was, back for revenge. It made him sick. Akeno. Issei's muttered voice was harsh even to his own ears. Would you mind going on ahead? I'll be back as soon as I finish things here. Era. Akeno held a hand to her lips, hiding her smile. Are you sure you want me to leave? The last time you and she fought, she almost won, you know. Issei clenched and unclenched the boosted gear. I know, but I've grown a lot since then. He glanced up at Akeno and presented her with a smile. Trust me. Very well then. Akeno patted her skirt, as if dusting them off. I'll go on ahead and find Bucho. I'm sure she could use some help. Black pinions extended from Akeno's back and she launched herself into the air, disappearing in the direction of Ko Academy. Rainier watched her go while Issei glared at the woman standing before him. That wasn't a very smart thing to do. Rainier turned back to him and smiled. Sending off the only person who can provide you with backup. I won't need her help to beat you. Rainier sneered. So confident, are we? Of course I am. Issei's vicious grin caused Rainier to actually take a step back. I've got an evil bastard for a sensei who's been helping me get stronger. I'm not the same little boy you fought back then. I'm stronger now. Rainier's face lit into a snarl as half a dozen light spears appeared above her head. We'll see how confident you are after I pump your body full of light. Devil Ninja. Rias grimaced as her shield dispersed. She'd used up a lot of energy protecting herself and Sona from that powerful attack, more than she wanted to admit to having expended. Still, she had plenty of power left at her disposal, and she would not hesitate to use it. Several fallen angels descended from the sky, their black wings blotting out the light. They rained spears of light upon her head, but Rias had already vacated the spot they'd aimed at, dragging an unconscious Sona with her. She left her friend under some cover, a piece of wall that had fallen on its side. It wouldn't protect the other girl, but it should keep the fallen from spotting her. More than that, Rias couldn't ask for. Eyes glaring up at the descending horde of fallen angels, Rias allowed her power to flow. It came to her, a rush of demonic energy. It infused her, granting her the power those from the Bale clan cherish so much. She then directed this power, forming it into several red spheres that hovered around her, crackling, tendrils of repressed energy arcing out at random. Destruction incarnate just waiting to be unleashed. You want a piece of me? Rias muttered with a hard glare. Then come and get it. Devil Ninja. The battle appeared to be going well at first. Gathered in pairs, the peerages of Rias and Sona managed to beat back the invaders. Waves of fallen angels crashed upon Ku Academy like a fierce storm, like a massive hurricane. But they soon discovered that, rather than a hurricane crushing an insignificant hut, they were more akin to a light breeze trying to blow over a stone fortress. They were beaten back, defeated at every turn. The devils who called this academy home used their knowledge of the school as choke points. They set up ambushes and prepared traps. The fallen angels had been expecting an easy victory, but what they found instead was a group of tenacious fighters intent on protecting their home. For a moment, the defenders allowed hope to well up within their breasts. For a second, they fully believed that victory was within their grasp. That they would be able to defeat this enemy who had presented itself so brazenly to them. All that changed when Kokobile entered the battle. Devil Ninja. 4 light spears shot forward at Issei as he rushed up to her. She expected him to take the attacks head-on, maybe try to block them with his longinus like he'd done the last time they fought. Instead, he slid underneath her spears and continued his charge, barely breaking stride. He lashed out with a punch, but Rainier had taken to the sky by then, and all he hit was air. "What's the matter?" Rainier taunted when he glared up at her. "Can't get me from up here." "Like hell I can't." Wings erupted from Issei's back as he launched himself into the air faster than she thought possible. He was on her almost before she had time to react, and only the timely production of a light spear gave her the chance to slip away. This did little to stop Issei, however, who followed her doggedly, his face a snarl of determination. Rainier sent more light spears, but they were dodged as Issei barrel rolled through them. His fist drew back as he came near and tried to punch her lights out. She managed to slip away again, moving left and watching as Issei slammed into the ground like a comet. The boosted gear user pulled his fist out of the hole he'd made in the ground, and stood to his full height, his head tilting up to glare at Rainier. She smirked. "What's with the glare, Issei-kun?" she asked, her voice taunting, mocking. "Are you upset because even after all this time, you're still just a pathetic little weakling who can't even touch little old me?" Issei stared at her for several seconds longer. And then he smiled. "No." His voice seeped amusement. It also came from behind her. "I'm just wondering how long it's gonna take before you realize this isn't the real me." "What?" Rainier turned around, only to feel a gauntlet-covered fist being slammed into her face. "Devil Ninja." Kokobeel's amused grin remained plastered on his face as he descended onto the battlefield. Unlike his pawns who entered through the doors, he made his own door, blowing up a large portion of the wall and stepping into a corridor on the first floor. "And look, my first victim is already waiting for me." He grinned at the young man who gaped back at him. "Hello there." The words were polite but the tone was mocking. "I'm looking for either Rias Grimori or Sona Citri. Have you seen them?" The boy didn't say anything, but his glare hardened. "Oh." Kokobeel raised an eyebrow. "Are you going to make things difficult for me?" In response to his words, a small line shot out from the gauntlet on the boy's left hand. It wrapped around him, and he looked down curiously as he felt the thing trying to drain him of his energy. "How cute." He flared his power, feeding it into the line. The line lit up, the light quickly traveling up to the boy, whose eyes widened as he realized what was about to happen too little too late. Smoke poured off the boy's body as Kokobeel's holy power burned him. His body twitched and spasmed, jerked and shuddered. Whimpers escaped a throat that slowly closed up as the muscles inside of it contracted painfully. A flicker of movement came from Kokobeel's left. He sliced the line apart with a light spear and took a step back, just in time to avoid having a girl with brownish-red hair trying to run him through. So predictable. That same girl crashed through a wall when he rammed his fist into her torso. She didn't even have time to scream before her insides were crushed and her body was sent crashing through several inches of thick cement. The wall crumbled around her, burying her underneath it. "Tomo," was the young boy's gurgled cry. "Is that her name?" Kokobeel gripped a fistful of the boy's hair and pulled him up. "She must be one of your teammates, then. Am I right? Are you upset that I hurt her?" His lips twisted into a gruesome facsimile of a smile. "Then why don't you do something about it?" "No." "Then shut up." The boy could do nothing as Kokobeel tossed him into the air like he weighed less than a feather and slammed a knife-shaped hand straight through his chest. He gasped as the hand exploded out of his back in a spray of gore. Hands weakly rose and gripped the arm impaling it, but quickly grew limp. "Oh dear," Kokobeel muttered to himself, ignoring the blood caking to his skin and clothing. "I seem to have made a bit of a mess. I always do that when I see a devil, you see. Especially one as weak as yourself." He chuckled in a manner that was almost self-deprecating. "I just can't help but want to see them bleed." Without a thought, Kokobeel tossed the boy off his hair and watched as his victim slammed into a wall and slowly slid down, leaving behind a trail of blood. That was not very fun. Kokobeel turned to look at several other devils who'd rushed down this corridor. They froze when he smiled at them. "I hope you will provide me with more entertainment than that one did." Devil Ninja, it wasn't supposed to be like this. Issei was a weak little fool. A naive child whose strength was solely dependent on his sacred gear. Victory should have been easy. So why am I losing? Rainier had been given plenty of time to think about her defeat at Issei's hands. She had concluded that the only reason he won was due to her underestimating him and his boosted gear. Had she given it her all from the very start, he wouldn't have stood a chance. She had decided to give it her all here. She wouldn't hold back. She would kill him before he could even blink. That was the plan, anyway. She was beginning to realize that plans rarely ever go the way people want them to. Issei avoided another barrage of light spears, gliding through them in a way that looked buffoonish and clumsy, but was also undeniably effective. She sent some more at him, but he avoided those, too. She tried to backpedal, but soon realized with a start that she couldn't move because something had grabbed her legs. She looked down and saw a pair of hands, one of them covered by a red gauntlet with a green gem shining in its middle. She looked back and saw another red gauntlet hurtling towards her face. Rainier barely had a second to wonder how Issei had managed to replicate himself before the gauntlet slammed into her and darkness descended. Devil Ninja, there. Issei clapped his hands together, a satisfied smile on his face as he looked down at the unconscious Rainier. I told that bitch I'd kick her ass. Indeed you did, though it wasn't much of a victory. What are you talking about? This was a total victory. I creamed her. Rainier was never that strong to begin with. You were just so weak that she seemed strong in comparison. Ah, whatever, Issei grumbled. You're just being a bully. Anyway, I should catch up with Akeno. Are you just going to leave the fallen angel like this? Issei frowned, confused, but then quickly realized what Diedreg meant and snapped his fingers together. Ah, right, I should probably tie her up with something. That isn't what Where did you get all that rope? Ah, Issei blushed as he began tying Rainier to a tree in a way that was highly erotic and emphasized her breasts. Akeno always makes me carry some rope on me. How come I wasn't aware of this? And is that a ball gag? It was, indeed, a ball gag that Issei pulled out of his pants pocket. Issei looked down at the ball gag in equal parts joy and mortification. It was this very same ball gag that Akeno had shoved into his mouth after drugging his food the night after the raiding game, when he had saved her from the grilled chicken's queen. After a moment of silent staring, he shoved the ball gag into Rainier's mouth, and then stood back and admired his handiwork. Huh, not bad, but I don't think I'm at Akeno-san's level yet. Issei scratched his head. Well, not that I expected to be, but still, he trailed off, then shook his head. Anyway, I should get back to Ko Academy now. Issei ignored Diedreg's exasperated sigh as he ran off in the direction of his school. He had some more ass to kick. Devil Ninja. Kokobeel's next set of victims were a pair of bishops. They were both girls. Neither had time to so much as scream before he appeared before them and pierced them with his light spears. They crumpled swiftly, their bodies spraying blood like a fire hydrant. His next two targets were a surprise. Exorcists, he mused, grinning as he held Durandal in one and Excalibur mimic in the other. I had not expected to see you here. I thought you would have fled the moment you got the Excaliburs back within your grasp. We decided to stick around until we can get rid of you, Zenobia growled through gritted teeth. So I see. Kokobeel's nod was almost sagely in its mannerisms. Yes, that is an admirable goal. Unfortunately, it's out of your reach. Zenobia, Irina shouted, horrified as a light spear exploded through Zenovia's chest and out her back. The blue-haired exorcist released her grip on Durandal, which clattered uselessly to the floor, and was then tossed away like a ragdoll, her body plowing through the already weakened structure of the academy. Was that your friend? Kokobeel asked the tearful Irina, his now free hand going to her throat. My apologies. I had not realized you two were so close. But then, perhaps I should have. You two did attack me together, after all. His eyes brightened as he looked at the girl whose hands now gripped his forearm. Her face was turning blue. I know. Why don't I let you join her? Why, you're a monster, Irina gasped out. A monster. Kokobeel slowly nodded. Yes, I suppose I am. And you know what? I am okay with that. Before Irina had time to react, Kokobeel nails pierced her throat. The pony-tailed exorcist gurgled as blood leaked out from around his sharpened nails, even as her eyes dulled and her body went limp. Smiling a vicious smile, Kokobeel tossed the girl in the same direction as her brethren. There. Now you two can die together. Aren't I kind? Kokabeel asked no one in particular. Devil Ninja. They came at him together, Kiba and Tsubaki. Attacking in unison, the pair unleashed a flurry of devastating attacks at the monster who'd wiped several of their friends by himself. It was all for naught. Kokabeel avoided the lightning-quick swipes of Kiba's blade, and he knocked aside Tsubaki's thrusts with only a single hand. Is this all you two can do? He asked, his lips turning into a frown. And here I thought you devils would put up more of a fight. Kiba smirked as he and Tsubaki pushed one last time before disengaging. Kokabeel didn't have much time to be curious before something powerful slammed into his back. The fallen angel leader was sent flying, crashing through walls and slamming into the ground. He rolled several times before coming to a stop. He muttered as he stood to his feet once more, blood leaking down his mouth. That kind of hurt. Several figures darted into the room. The blonde swordsman, the elegant naginata wielder, and a little white-haired girl. They rushed him at the same time, each coming in from separate direction. Kiba's blades danced, Tsubaki thrust her naginata, and Kaneko moved in from the front, her fists primed. Kokabeel was about to attack, when he sensed movement behind him. Reacting with speed none of them could see, his wings unfurled. The clang of metal sounded out as Durandal slammed into one wing while Excalibur Mimic hit the other. One hand blocked Kiba's swings, grasping and then shattering both swords, while the other fiercely gripped the naginata. Kaneko managed to land a punch, but now that he was prepared, she may as well have been a fly trying to punch 14 inches of steel plating. That's not going to work. None of them were given a chance to move before Kokabeel reacted. His left hand smashed into Kiba's face, sending the boy flying away, while his right pierced through Tsubaki's left lung. The girl collapsed as he pulled his hand out, but he ignored her and punched at Kaneko. The little girl proved herself quite capable when she diverted his initial attack, however, she couldn't avoid the knee that slammed into her face, for it moved too quickly for her eyes to follow. Irina and Zenobia leapt away when his wings expanded to push them back. He turned and eyed the pair curiously, his head tilted, making him look like a demented child. I could have sworn I killed you too. He shrugged. Oh well, no matter. Come. He beckoned them forward. Let's see if you can do a little better this time. Devil Ninja. They attacked him much the same as before, moving in unison, trying to cover each other's flanks. Their movements were synchronized. When one went on offense, the other went on defense. Like a pair of skilled dancers they moved. Their swords flashed out. Durandal, powerful and large, rent the ground. Its contrast was presented in Excalibur Mimic, which moved with surgical precision, striking at Kokabeel's openings, seeking to penetrate his defenses. Kokabeel proved himself a skilled combatant as he dodged and wove through the hailstorm of swings. He batted Durandal aside like it was an insect, and then blasted Zenobia away with a powerful kick. Irina was not nearly as lucky. After disarming her by breaking her arm when she tried to attack again, he sliced her from left hip to right shoulder. The girl crumbled to the ground where a pool of blood started to form. Normally, he would have taken a moment to savor this victory, inconsequential though it was. However, Kaneko came rushing in again, her fists lit with blue fire. Sitting on her head, twitching, were a pair of white cat ears. A Neko show. Kokabeel's bemusement didn't stop him from respond when the girl sent several blue energy projectiles his way. I had not realized there was a Neko show within the Grimoire group. Or are you in the Leviathan Sisters peerage? Kaneko didn't answer, though the number of attacks she sent nearly doubled. I suppose it doesn't matter, Kokabeel shrugged, unconcerned. You'll die here just like everyone else. Kaneko didn't say anything, she merely attacked. Blue spheres of energy shot from her hands and were met by several light spears, which shot through her senjutsu attacks and then pierced her body, perforating it with numerous holes. And then she disappeared. Kokabeel jumped backwards as, like a volcanic eruption, the ground beneath his feet exploded in a shower of cement fragments. He raised an arm to block the worst of the debris from getting into his face, and because of that he almost missed Kaneko slamming feet first into him. Almost. Cute tactics, Kokabeel sneered as he tossed Kaneko away, but they won't work on me. Instead of crashing through the wall, Kaneko used it as a springboard to launch herself at Kokabeel again. He sneered at her and sent a wave of death in her direction, 100 light spears, all set to impale her. She disappeared again. Another illusion, Kokabeel mused before his instincts warned him of incoming danger. He raised his hand and caught Durandal between his fingers, frowning at the girl on the other end of the sword. You are a most insistent bug. You just refuse to stay down. With a swift yank, Kokabeel pulled Durandal from the girl's grip. He then reversed his grip and, now holding the sword by the handle, impaled Zenobia onto her own weapon. The girl's eyes went wide. And then she vanished, too. So I see. Spinning around, Kokabeel summoned a shield of light to block all incoming attacks. Metal shards rained upon him from broken demonic blades. Excalibur mimic bounced off the shield. Durandal let out a loud screech as it scraped along the crackling white barrier, while Naginata tried to unsuccessfully pierce his protection. Kokabeel frowned from the other side of the barrier as he saw all of the people he had killed up again. None of the wounds he'd inflicted were present. Skin had been re-knit. Bones repaired. The only sign of damage were the myriad of holes in their clothing. This is becoming vexing, Kokabeel grumbled under his breath. How did you he smiled suddenly. Then he chuckled. Of course, how could I forget about that most annoying sacred gear, Twilight Healing? It was the one I sent that foolish child, Rainier, to retrieve. The warrior's present tensed. Kokabeel's smile widened. Come out, wherever you are, his mocking voice sung. I promise I won't hurt you. Wait. That's a lie. I will hurt you. I'll hurt you a lot. The four fighters charged at him, no doubt hoping to keep him from finding their healer. He smiled. All too easy. Devil Ninja, Tsubaki was the first to go. Her attacks were simply too predictable. She tried impaling him through the chest, and instead he ended up impaling her. After throwing her once again lifeless body away, he dealt with the two holy sword users by burying them under several tons of rubble. Kiba and Kaneko attacked together. Kokabeel had to admit, they were a good team. The girl and her senjutsu made a formidable foe, and her illusions had confounded him more than once. But it didn't matter in the end. He eventually struck them both down, Kiba with a light spear through the back, and Kaneko by literally crushing her under the weight of the second floor, and then obliterating the spot she'd been standing on for good measure. After that, he tried to find the one with Twilight Healing, the nun. He frowned as he stretched out with his senses and felt nothing. Deciding not to bother with subtlety, he obliterated the entire room, and the room above him. It was then that he found Asia, the little nun who should have died months ago. She was being carried away by a girl with flame-like wings. Now that just won't do. A wave of his hand and several hundred light spears suddenly surrounded the pair on all sides. Another wave and those same light spears slammed into them. The Phoenix girl tried protecting Asia from the attacks, but they overwhelmed the shield she tried casting. He watched, satisfied as the two fell to the ground. Asia, a figure zoomed in and tried to catch the pair, but Kokabeel was having none of that and sent several light spears at the boy who bore the boosted gear. Much to his disappointed, he didn't hit Issei, who dodged his attacks. Even more unfortunate was that three more figures flew in. He recognized one of them. I see the sister of Sirzex has finally shown her wretched face, Kokabeel grinned as Rias Grimori glared at him. As she and the other two descended, he noticed the blood leaking from between gashes in her clothing. And I see you've been having quite the trouble with my pawns. Tisk, Grimori-san. You should have known they were merely a diversion. But then again, I guess I shouldn't have expected anything less. You're not Sirzex, after all. Rias did not say anything at first. She landed on the ground, holding both Ravel and Asia. Asia, Issei rushed over to Rias' side and looked at the burnt, scarred face of Asia Argento. Tears leaked from his eyes and his hands clenched into fists. He gritted his teeth as sadness turned to rage. You, Issei glared at Kokabeel. You hurt Asia. So I did, Kokabeel replied, amused. What are you going to do about it? Bash your face in. That's what. Rias' eyes widened. Eyes. No. Wait. Asia is. But it was too late. You're going to bash my face in. Kokabeel grinned. Very well. You are welcome to try. Gladly. Boost. 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 Issei's boosted gear glowed with ethereal fire as the boy's power skyrocketed. His eyes burned viciously as he rushed at Kokobile with murderous intent. Kokobile watched in interest as more gems appeared along the gauntlet's length. As sharp ridges formed what appeared to be metallic dragon spikes. His interest increased when something shot from the gauntlet's knuckles. The 2-foot-long sword was thrust at Kokobile, who dodged to the side, only for the segments to split, a thin string of metal connecting them. The sword then curved and sliced into Kokobile's cheek, drawing blood. Kokobile glowered at the boy, and then put him down by impaling him with nearly a dozen light spears. Eyes. The boy stumbled for a moment, his face twisting into confusion. He looked at Kokobile, and then down at himself. Oh, he breathed out as he fell to his knees. His eyes glazed over and his body tilted before falling down. He did not get back up. Did you really think a frontal assault was a good idea? Foolish boy. Kokobile shook his head. And here I thought you would provide me with more entertainment. Oh well. Eyes. Kokobile smiled when and raised his hand to block the vicious bolt of lightning that was hurled at him. He looked over at the devil glaring him down. She stood next to the prone Issei, her purple eyes narrowed in hatred. Lightning, and the strange energy you're emitting. Now that is a familiar feeling. Akeno, don't talk, eyes. You're injured. Akeno, Akeno, Akeno. Kokobile hummed in thought before grinning. You wouldn't happen to be Barakiel's daughter by any chance, would you? Don't you dare say his name. Akeno snarled and hurled another blast of lightning at him. Kokobile grinned and this time, rather than merely block the attack, he sent it back at the girl. His lips peeled back as he listened to the girl scream in anguish. That sound was like music to his ears. Truly, Beethoven had nothing on this wonderful noise, this symphony of pain. Akeno fell onto her hands and knees, her body twitching as smoke wafted off it. Kokobile chuckled, which caused her to raise her head and glare at him. Such a frightening look. At least, it would have been frightening on someone like your father. That man, Akeno growled as blessed lightning coursed through her body, is not my father. No, my mistake. Then, a spear appeared above him, which he then sent at the devil kneeling on the ground. Dark red matter slammed into his light spear. He hadn't put much power into it, but he was impressed to see it get destroyed so easily. His eyes turned to Rias, who glared at him, her shoulders heaving. Do not touch my servants, she growled. I will not allow you to harm them. Poor Rias. Kokobile looked at her in mock sympathy. Don't you know? Look around you. I already have harmed your peerage. Rias flinched. All of them are lying here, practically dead. And why? Because you have failed to protect them. Failed to keep them safe. That's because you're a failure of a king, Kokobile interrupted, causing Rias to grit her teeth. Is it not the job of a king to protect those who serve under them? You should have been here, fighting with them. Instead, you allowed yourself to get drawn into a battle against lesser forces, allowing me to pick off your pieces one by one. Even now, you're not attacking me. Your peerage are hurt, probably dead, and yet you haven't even tried to seek vengeance. His taunting smile caused Rias to reel. That doesn't sound very kingly, does it? Blood trailed down Rias' lip as she bit it hard. Have I offended you? Kokobile asked, chuckling to himself. If so, then why don't you come over here and make me eat my words? Akeno, Rias muttered, causing her queen to look up at her. Please take eyes somewhere safe. Safe. Kokobile heard her and crowed. There is nowhere safe for you and your peerage. Have you not looked around? You are surrounded, outnumbered 100 to 1. There is no escape for any of you. Devil ninja. Rias ignored Kokobile and looked at her queen. Please, go now. Akeno frowned. I do not know if that's a good idea. Are you going to leave Eyes to die? Akeno was silent. Go. Rias smiled and made a shooing gesture. I will be fine. I'm not alone. I will stay here. Now, follow Sona and leave this to me. Akeno dithered for a moment, but eventually nodded and grabbed Issei. Akeno, quiet, Akeno murmured. I thought I told you not to speak. As Akeno ran from the battlefield, several fallen angels tried chasing after her. They were deterred when a number of senjutsu bullets shot out of the ground. Several of the fallen dodged, but a few didn't. Those who didn't regretted it as their bodies were obliterated, bursting like overripe fruit. The ground near Rias shifted. A tiny hand shot out from the earth. The tiny hand was joined by another just as tiny hand. Then a head emerged. Triangular cat ears twitched as Kaneko pulled herself from the ground. She was dirty, filthy, and not just from plain dirt. Blood caked to her body like a second layer of skin. The upper left part of her shirt, from the shoulder to her stomach, was torn, and through that tear, an incredibly nasty cut gushed vast quantities of blood. "Are you okay, Kaneko?" The white-haired girl grimaced, but nodded her head. "Are you sure? I can still fight," Kaneko determined, her eyes shifting as she looked around the battlefield. "What happened to Ravel?" Rias grimaced. "I see. She's alive," Rias said in a hopeful tone. "Sona and Akeno have taken her and Issei to our fallback point. Our job right now is to keep Kokobile and the other fallen angels distracted long enough for Sona and her pawns to get everyone else to safety." Kaneko surveyed the many fallen angels that still hovered above them. "That's a pretty tall order." "I know," Rias smiled grimly. "However, Sona should be sending the servants she left in reserve to help us in a bit." While they had not expected such an overwhelming show of force, Rias and Sona had been well aware in the difference of power between them and Kokobile. They knew that a battle against him could end in defeat, and that their job wasn't to beat Kokobile, but give Rias' brother enough time to marshal his troops and come to aid them. To this end, they had put several of Sona's peerage members on reserve, to help bolster their ranks should the first line of defense fall. "How long do we need to keep Kokobile occupied?" Kaneko asked. Rias bit her lip. I don't know, for as long as we need to, I guess." Kaneko looked like she wanted to reprimand her king, but she didn't. Her resigned sigh seemed to be an exhale that released all the pent-up tension inside of her body. She ignored the small wince as her wounds tightened painfully and did her best to limber up. "I guess that means we'll need to be cunning." "Right." Rias took some comfort in Kaneko's unflappable personality. She never displayed her emotions often, a result of her sister's abominable betrayal, but Rias knew that her rook must have been afraid just like her. "So, I guess that leaves us with Formation White Petals." Kaneko nodded. Formation White Petals. Devil Ninja. Formation White Petals was one of several designated battle formations that Rias had created during their many group practice sessions. It originally involved Kaneko casting several illusions that made it look like her and Akeno were attacking their enemy, when in truth they were moving around their enemy's flank in a pincer maneuver. Once in position, they would unleash a devastating attack that could be likened to an anvil and a hammer. From the many practices they had done, she knew it was a devastating combination. Without Akeno to provide the anvil, Rias and Kaneko would have to improvise. It started off simple enough. While Kaneko was still learning the ins and outs of illusions, she was good enough to fool most people who'd never experienced them before. Kokobile, for all his talent in battle and fighting prowess, had never actually fought against a yokai, and therefore had never experienced illusions. He could recognize them, but he couldn't tell he'd been placed in one until after the illusion had run its course. Rias watched patiently as the illusion took effect. Kokobile laughed as Rias seemingly attacked him with her powers of destruction, swatting away non-existent attacks thinking they were real. She snuck around one side, and glanced across the field to see Kaneko sneaking across the other, the little Nekosho's teeth grit as she struggled to keep the illusion up. Several explosions near the academy main building alerted her to Sona's peerage members arriving. She hoped they would be able to get everyone away from here quickly. She didn't know how wounded they were, but she knew how hard her peerage would have fought, and so knew that, logically, they must be in dire straits. She and Kaneko were soon in position. Kokobile was snarling and spitting insults at the illusory versions of herself and her rook. A glance at the white-haired girl revealed that she was also in position and ready to attack. They locked eyes. Kaneko nodded. Rias took a deep breath and began gathering her energy for their next assault. A tiny orb formed within the palm of her hand. Arcs of arcane energy emitted from it, tendrils skittering along its surface. The orb soon grew, expanding from the size of a baseball to the size of a basketball and then a beach ball. Rias raised her hand above her head and continued gathering her powers of destruction within it. Sweat formed on her brow. Her teeth became grit as she struggled with the massive amount of power she was unleashing. The orb grew larger and larger and larger. And then it shrunk. Abruptly. Suddenly. No longer a massive sphere of crackling energy, but now a super-condensed sphere of pure power. Rias looked at Kaneko to see her rook had copied her move as best she could. The blue senjutsu sphere was about the size of a basketball, and it roared like a raging forest fire. They waited for exactly 2 seconds, and then simultaneously tossed their attacks at Kokobile. The attacks hit the fallen angel full on. The resulting explosion was so powerful that the displaced air resulting from the explosion shattered the sound barrier. Rias needed to cover her ears to protect them. Even then, she still felt blood pouring from them. After the rush of displaced wind came the wave of energy. The combined force of senjutsu and demonic power slammed into her with more force than any storm, more power than she had ever felt before save when she gave Issei her power so he could boost and unleash it. Rias was almost blown off her feet. It was only due to her entrenching herself that she managed to keep from being tossed away like a leaf in a hurricane. Kaneko was faring better, surprisingly. The girl had hunkered down, using her rook-granted strength to keep herself anchored to the ground. Tiny hands and feet fiercely gripped the earth, digging into the soil with a grip of steel. From where she crouched, Rias could see the yellow eyes of Kaneko burning brightly as they looked at the flame, and for just a moment, an image of Naruto overlapped her. He is going to be so proud when he gets back. The wave of energy dispersed, but in doing so it left a vacuum. All of that air, all of that energy, everything released in a single burst that traveled at speeds beyond mortal comprehension, left a void within the blast area. And voids needed to be filled, for the earth always sought to equalize itself. Rias struggled to retain her grip on the ground when the air currents reversed course. Instead of trying to shove her away from where the explosion took place, it tried sucking her in. And it did a pretty good job. However, she was nothing if not tenacious, and so she dug her fingers deeper into the soil. Even as her fingers bled, as her nails felt like they were being pulled off, she kept a tight hold on the ground. And then it was over. Rias took in several deep breaths. She hadn't realized it at first, but with all that air blowing past her at supersonic speeds, she hadn't been able to take in a breath. She chanced at glance at Kaneko, to see the girl edging her way to the now large crater their battleground hosted. Rias had to admit, it was a massive thing, at least 20 meters in diameter if not bigger. While she hadn't known what to expect from their combined attacks, it most certainly wasn't that. It's over now, surely. Kokobile couldn't have survived something like that. She dared to hope that the battle was over. Dared to dream that they had won. Those hopes were dashed when, without warning, a single spear of light, minuscule compared to some of the other ones, speared Kaneko through the chest. The rook's eyes went wide as she gazed down at the spear. She then looked up, into the horrified Rias' eyes, right before collapsing in an inglorious heap. And here I thought she would have been able to survive that, a sardonic voice said as a completely unscathed Kokobile ascended into the sky. And no, Rias whispered, her eyes still staring at the now still figure. Kaneko. I don't know why you would bother adding such trash to your peerage, Kokobile said, his manner uncaring and dismissive. But then again, you devils are a desperate bunch. I guess that's why you have to turn humans into devils. Your desperation drives you to bolster your numbers with garbage like that little Nekosho over there. In that moment, something inside of Rias snapped. Every good emotions, every positive thought, all of it fled. And in its place, only hatred remained. With a shrill banshee-like wail, Rias unleashed all of her power, dredging up every last bit of demonic energy and launching assault after assault on her foe. It all proved futile, though. Kokobile merely laughed as he swatted her attacks away like bugs, sending them sailing through the air, uncaring if they decimated his own forces. Rias soon ran out of energy. And with her energy spent, despair soon followed. She fell back onto her knees and began to weep. That's right, Kokobile whispered, his eyes closing as he savored Rias' crumbling resolve like a sommelier savoring a vintage red. Despair. Weep and cry and know that you are weak. Know that your peerage was killed because of your weakness. Know, in your last moments, that your weakness has caused the beginning of the end for your species. As Kokobile closed in on her, Rias did exactly as he said. She despaired. She railed against her weakness. She cried at how her peerage had been killed because of her. If only she'd been stronger. If only she'd been smarter. If only she'd been a better king. If only Naruto were here, She suddenly felt very angry at Naruto for choosing to leave when they needed him here. When she needed him here. Kokubile landed on the ground several meters from her. She didn't pay attention as he walked towards her. His feet thudding dully on the hard earth were but a fading echo in her ears. Look at you, Kokubile continued to taunt, so pathetic. Where is that vaunted confidence you devils are supposed to possess? For someone who is supposed to be the sister of a Mao, you are awfully weak. Despite not having much strength left in her, Rias still had enough of it to toss him a glare. Kokubile chuckled. Defiant to the last, he raised his hand. Only to stop when a loud, shrill whistling sound emitted from above them. He and Rias looked up to see what appeared to be a comet falling toward them. It streaked through the atmosphere, a bright phosphorus light of a most brilliant orange. Closer and closer it came. Rias' eyes widened as descended right into the formation of fallen angels above them, incinerating them, burning them to cinders before they could so much as squeal. Even those who weren't in its direct path spontaneously combust as the heat caused their body fat to explode. And then the comet struck the ground between her and Kokubile, and for a single moment, the world felt like it had come to an end. Devil Ninja, Naruto had expected to be scolded upon arriving home. He had expected Rias to be upset with him for leaving, and demand an explanation, which he would be all too happy to give. He had expected maybe a slap to the face for doing something stupid, and then a night of passion because she had missed him. What he had not expected was to find his school destroyed, a bunch of fallen angels floating above him, a tear-stained Rias on the ground, and Kaneko laying several feet away with a pool of blood expanding to coat the grass in carmine. His eyes swept across the area, taking note of the fallen angels, and eyeing the man who had stopped walking toward Rias to eye him back. He looked back at Rias. Rias, what happened here? He knew the answer, but he needed to hear it first. He needed to, because he didn't want to believe he was right, and he fervently hoped he was wrong. The fallen angels attacked us, Naruto closed his eyes and shuddered. And Kaneko, who did that to her? That would be me, a deep, grating voice spoke up. Naruto eyed the man who stood before him. His appearance suggested that he had once been handsome, but had since become a twisted mockery of his former self. And you are, Kokubile. A mocking bow was given along with an equally mocking smirk, at your service. Office, Naruto said softly to the girl standing by his side. She looked up at him, her normally blank eyes somewhat inquisitive. Do you know how to heal? Yes. Can you heal Kaneko? Office's eyes flicked to Kaneko, and then back to Naruto. Yes. Will you? Yes. Thank you. Office vanished before everyone's eyes. While Kokubile looked shocked and Rias appeared flabbergasted, Naruto remained focused on the man before him. I do not like violence, he said softly. While fighting is okay, I despise killing and anything that could perpetuate the cycle of hatred. That is why I am going to give you this one chance to leave. Kokubile actually needed a moment to respond. Oh, well, in that case, I guess I have no choice but to leave. Kokubile's tone was mocking, after all. Naruto. Yes, the great Naruto asked me to. What can a fallen angel like myself do but leave? A pause. Kokubile's eyes glinted almost mischievously as his sharp, saw-like teeth gleamed brightly behind fairly peeled back lips. Oh, that's right, I can kill you. You will not be killing anyone this day. Is that so? Who is it that will make me do this? Who has the power to make me do this? You do not know who you're talking to, boy. I am Kokubile. I have fought wars before your grandfather was a twinkle in his great-grandfather's eyes. I have slayed creatures far more powerful than you. I have spilled the blood of countless people. Someone who proclaims to hate violence, who says he abhors it, could never kill one who revels in it. Naruto felt a calm settle over his mind. A solid determination. Self-reprimands could come later. Reflections would happen when he was alone. Now was not the time for regrets or recriminations over his own stupidity. He had an enemy to defeat. I will make you eat those words very soon. Kokubile's smile grew all wider at that proclamation. Then come, child, let us see you try. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.